They already know. That is the part that keeps them up at night. Not the possibility, not the maybe, not the what if. They know. Deep in whatever space inside them still has the capacity for honesty. They know that what is coming for them is not cruelty, not unfairness, not an attack from someone bitter or broken or lost. What is coming for them is the truth. And the truth has been patient. The truth has been waiting. The truth has been watching you do the work. Stay in the silence. Carry the weight without a single word of complaint, without a single moment of public collapse, without a single day where you let them see how close they came to breaking you. And now the truth is almost here, and they are terrified. You feel it, do you not? You feel the shift in the room before anyone says a word. You feel the way certain people have gone quiet around you, the way the energy changed, the way the ones who laughed the loudest at your lowest point have suddenly started watching you differently, not with respect yet, not fully, but with something unfamiliar, something they are not used to feeling when they look at you. Something that sits uncomfortably in their chest and will not let them sleep the way they used to sleep when they thought they had won. They thought they had won. Let that sit for a moment. They saw you fall and they called it finished. They saw you stumble and they called it over. They saw the silence that came after the storm and they mistook your rebuilding for your ruin. They mistook your stillness for your surrender. They saw you stop explaining yourself, and they assumed you had run out of truth to speak. They saw you stop fighting publicly, and they assumed you had accepted defeat. And they celebrated. Oh, they celebrated. They passed the news around like it was something sweet, something to be savored, something that validated every dark thought they ever had about your worth, your potential, your right to rise. But here is what they did not understand. They did not understand that the silence was not absence, it was construction. They did not understand that the stillness was not surrender, it was strategy. They did not understand that when a person stops performing their pain for an audience and goes inward, they are not dying. They are being reborn into something the audience was never meant to see until it is complete. And you have almost completed it. You have almost crossed the distance between who you were the day they counted you out and who you are becoming in this very moment, in this very breath, in this very quiet and extraordinary season where everything inside you is being forged into something that cannot be undone. And they know it. That is the part that keeps them awake, not what you might do to them. You are not that small. You are not carrying revenge in your hands. You are carrying something far more dangerous than revenge. You are carrying evidence, living, breathing, visible, undeniable evidence that everything they said about you was wrong. And there is nothing more terrifying to someone who built their identity on your collapse than the moment they have to watch your rise. Let us go back to the beginning, because you need to understand something about yourself that perhaps you forgot in the darkness. You need to remember what you were made of before the wound happened, before the moment that changed everything, before the public humiliation, or the quiet betrayal, or the season when the thing you had built started to come apart in ways you could not fully control, and the people around you started making their choices about which side of your story they wanted to stand on. You were already extraordinary. Not in the way that gets applause, not in the way that gets rooms full of people chanting your name. Extraordinary in the quieter way. The way that shows up at 4 a.m. when no one is watching. The way that keeps going when going makes no logical sense anymore. The way that finds something true to hold on to in the middle of situations that should have crushed any reasonable person under their weight. That was you. That has always been you. And that is the part they never fully accounted for when they made their calculations about your future. They forgot who they were actually dealing with. They looked at the surface. They looked at the moment. They looked at the wound, and they did not see past it to the thing underneath. The thing that does not bleed, the thing that does not beg, the thing that sits quietly in the center of your chest and says, "This is not over." Even when every piece of evidence in the visible world is suggesting that it might be, that thing in you says, "No, this is not over." And it was right. Tick, tick. The clock has been moving, whether you noticed it or not. Every day that passed while they were laughing was a day you were accumulating. Every morning you got up when you did not feel like getting up was a deposit into something they cannot access, cannot count, cannot see, cannot take. Every choice you made in private to do the harder thing, the better thing, the more disciplined thing, was building a structure so solid, so deep, so anchored in something real, that when the wind comes again, and wind always comes again, you will not move. You will not move. And they sense it. That is the terrifying part for them. They can feel it in the way you carry yourself now. Something changed in you. Something settled. The version of you that needed their approval to feel whole, that version is gone. The version of you that would twist yourself into whatever shape might make them comfortable, that version is gone. What stands in front of them now is something they genuinely do not know how to manage, because they do not have the tools for someone who has stopped needing anything from them, someone who looked into the deepest part of their own pain and found not emptiness but identity, not weakness but clarity. You know who you are now, and knowing who you are is one of the most threatening things a person can become. Because once you know, they cannot tell you. Once you know, their opinions stop carrying weight. Once you know, the narratives they built about you, the stories they circulated about your failures and your flaws and your supposed irrelevance, those narratives lose their power. They become noise. And you have become someone who has learned to work beautifully in the presence of noise without being distracted by it. They did not prepare for this version of you. Think about what it cost you to become this. Think about the nights that had no bottom, the kind of darkness where you could not see your hand in front of your face, could not imagine morning, could not remember what it felt like to be certain about anything. The kind of darkness where the people who should have stayed left, where the support systems you had built over years cracked, where the reputation you had constructed carefully and honestly was suddenly being read through a lens of failure, and people were surprised by how quickly they found it easy to believe the worst, that cost you something. Do not pretend it did not. Do not perform a strength you did not actually feel in those moments. Because the real strength, the kind that lasts, the kind that is worth something, is not the strength you perform when people are watching. It is the strength you found when no one was watching, when the room was empty and the phone had gone quiet and the future looked like a wall with no door in it. When you sat with all of it and you did not run, you did not escape into something cheap and temporary. You sat with it. You felt every inch of it, and you made a decision, maybe not loud, maybe not dramatic, maybe just a quiet internal shift at 2 a.m. when the world was asleep and no one knew but you and whatever divine intelligence holds the record of human hearts. You decided to get up, not because you felt ready. You were not ready. Not because you felt strong. You were not strong yet. Not because you could see clearly what was coming. You could not see anything clearly. You decided to get up because something in you understood. At a level beneath logic, beneath language, beneath any explanation that would satisfy a skeptic, that you were not finished. That there was still something in you that had not been given yet. something that needed time and discipline and silence to develop before it could be offered to the world. And you protected that something. You protected it in the silence. You protected it by not explaining yourself to people who were not asking in good faith. You protected it by pulling back from spaces that were draining you of the energy you needed for the rebuilding. You protected it by choosing, day after day, to invest in yourself rather than in the performance of recovery. Real recovery. Not the kind you post about, the kind you live, the kind that happens in the gap between who you were and who you are becoming. The kind that has no audience and no applause and no validation from the outside world, because the outside world is not invited to this part. This part was just for you. And look what happened in that private space. Look what you built when you stopped worrying about what people were saying and started worrying only about what you were becoming. Look at the discipline you developed. Look at the standards you set for yourself that had nothing to do with other people's expectations and everything to do with your own deepest sense of what you were capable of. Look at the clarity that came when you stopped trying to manage how others saw you and started simply becoming the thing you were always meant to be. You got sharper, not angrier, sharper. There is a difference. Anger blurs things. It makes you reactive. It puts you in a position where you are always responding to them instead of building for yourself. But sharpness, the kind that comes from going through the fire and coming out refined rather than destroyed. Sharpness sees clearly. It moves precisely. It wastes nothing. It does not perform. It does not try to impress. It simply does the work, accumulates the evidence, and lets the results speak in a language that requires no translation. And the results are starting to speak. That is why they are terrified, not because you threatened them, not because you lowered yourself to any of the tactics they used against you, but because the results are starting to show. Because the silence is starting to become visible in the form of something real, something built, something that cannot be argued with, or dismissed, or reduced to luck, or timing, or circumstance. Something that has your fingerprints on every part of it. Something that could only have been built by someone who went through exactly what you went through and came out with exactly what you came out with. The work, the clarity, the identity, the rise. And somewhere the people who counted you out are doing the mathematics again, running the numbers on what they thought they knew about you, revisiting the conclusions they reached in the season of your stumble, and the numbers are not adding up the way they expected. The story they told themselves and others about your limitations is not matching the evidence that is accumulating in front of them. And that discrepancy, that gap between the narrative they built about you and the reality that is unfolding, that gap is the source of their terror, because it means they were wrong. No. They cannot fully accept that yet. Their pride will not let them accept it quickly. Pride rarely does. Pride will keep insisting on the old story for as long as possible, finding whatever scraps of contrary evidence it can to maintain the narrative. But the evidence is becoming too heavy, too visible, too consistent to ignore. And somewhere beneath the pride, in the honest part of them that they rarely let speak, they already know. They already know they miscalculated you. They already know they underestimated the material you were made of. They already know that their celebration was premature. And they know that when this becomes undeniable, when there is no longer any way to dismiss or minimize or attribute your rise to anything other than what it actually is, which is sustained effort, real growth, and an identity that survived everything they threw at it, they know what that means. It means the beats are coming. Not physical, not revenge, not cruelty, but something more permanent than any of those things. The beats of undeniable truth, the beats of visible success, the beats of a life lived so authentically and so powerfully that it answers every question, corrects every narrative, and settles every argument without a single word needing to be spoken directly to the people who doubt it. That kind of justice is perfect because you did not manufacture it, you did not perform it, you did not engineer it for the purpose of proving something to someone. You simply became consistently, relentlessly, and authentically the fullest version of what you were always capable of being. And the world reflects that back. And the people who needed you to be small in order for their story to make sense have to face what the world is reflecting, and they have no rebuttal. Wow, there is something almost poetic about that, something almost divine in the design, that the most powerful response to betrayal is not to pursue the betrayer, but to pursue your own excellence with such focus and such ferocity that the betrayal becomes the most irrelevant fact in your story. That the most satisfying justice is not the justice you demand, but the justice that emerges naturally from the quality of the life you build in the silence after the wound. And you built it. You chose it every single day, even on the days when choosing it felt impossible, even on the days when the momentum was zero and the energy was gone and the future felt like a wall with no door. Even on those days, you did one thing. You took one step, you wrote one line, you made one phone call, you showed up to one commitment, you kept one promise to yourself, even when you had let everything else fall apart. And that one thing, multiplied across every day of the season they thought was your ending, became the foundation of the season they were not expecting, the season of your becoming. Think about what it means to become. Not to arrive, not to succeed in the transactional sense, but to become, to be so transformed by what you went through that the person who stands on the other side of it is genuinely different from the person who entered it. Different in ways that matter, different in depth, different in clarity, different in purpose, different in the ability to recognize what is real and what is performance, what is lasting and what is temporary, what is worth your time and attention and what is not. You are that different person now. And the difference is visible. Not because you are broadcasting it, not because you are making announcements or positioning yourself in ways designed to send messages to the people who doubted you. The difference is visible simply because you cannot hide it anymore. It radiates, depth radiates, earned character radiates. The kind of strength that comes from having nothing left to hide because you have already survived the worst thing that could be used against you, that radiates in a way that no amount of branding or positioning could replicate. And they feel it. Every room you enter feels slightly different now. Not because of performance, not because of bravado, but because of what you carry. The quiet certainty of someone who has already paid the price for something and holds it fully. The kind of presence that does not need validation from the room because it does not come from the room. It comes from somewhere deeper, from the work, from the survival, from the choice made in private over and over and over again to become something real rather than something comfortable. You chose the real thing. And the real thing, when it finally emerges, is unmistakable. There is nothing quite like the sight of someone who chose to grow in the dark, someone who sat in the discomfort and did not run from it, did not numb it, did not pretend it was not there, but instead used it as fuel, used it as instruction, used it as the raw material for a version of themselves that could not have been built any other way. Used it until the suffering became wisdom, and the wisdom became direction, and the direction became momentum, and the momentum became the undeniable, visible, irrefutable rise that the naysayers are only now beginning to process. Ha ha ha. Processing. is a slow process for people who are certain, because certainty is a wall, and walls do not reconfigure quickly. When someone is certain you are limited, certain you are finished, certain that the story they wrote about you is accurate and permanent, the evidence that contradicts that certainty does not land immediately. It accumulates. It arrives in fragments. A piece here, a piece there. A result that cannot quite be explained. A development that does not fit the narrative. An accomplishment that sits uncomfortably beside the story they told. And they keep trying to explain it away. Keep trying to find the exception, the asterisk, the reason why this particular piece of evidence does not invalidate their overall conclusion. But the evidence keeps coming because you are not stopping. That is the part they did not factor into their calculations. They calculated based on who you were at your lowest point, in your most exposed season, when you had the least resources and the most pain and the thinnest margin for error. They calculated based on that version of you and decided the calculation was permanent. They did not factor in growth. They did not factor in the capacity of a human being to go from the lowest point of their life and use that very lowness as the launching platform for something extraordinary. They did not factor in what hunger does to a person who has already proven they can survive anything. Hungry is dangerous, not the hunger of desperation, not the hunger that makes people chaotic and reactive and destructive. The hunger that comes from having tasted your own rock bottom and rising above it. The hunger that comes from knowing at the cellular level that you can handle more than you thought. The hunger that comes from having survived the thing you were most afraid of and discovering that on the other side of the worst thing is not nothing. On the other side is clarity. On the other side is purpose. On the other side is a version of yourself you could not have found any other way. That hunger is quiet. That hunger is precise. That hunger does not broadcast itself. It simply works, and you have been working. Every day that passed while they were dismissing you was a day you were working. Every week that went by while they were building their narrative around your failure was a week you were building something they could not see. Every month that accumulated while they were comfortable in their conclusions was a month you were accumulating evidence that their conclusions were wrong. And now the months have become a season, and the season is becoming visible. And the people who counted you out are beginning to see what the silence contained. Beginning to understand what the stillness was actually hiding, beginning to piece together that the absence of noise from your direction was not the absence of progress. It was the presence of the kind of focus that does not have time for noise, the kind of commitment that does not need an audience, the kind of rise that is built for permanence rather than performance. And it is beautiful. Not in a soft way, not in a comfortable way. Beautiful the way truth is beautiful, the way justice is beautiful, the way a thing that was supposed to be destroyed but refused becomes beautiful in its refusal. Beautiful in the way that only things earned through genuine suffering and genuine commitment can be beautiful. There is no shortcut to this kind of beauty. There is no hack that produces it. There is no strategy sophisticated enough to manufacture it. It can only come from the real thing, and you gave it the real thing. You gave it everything. There were days you gave it when you were not sure there was anything left to give. Days when the well felt empty and you dipped into it anyway and somehow something came up. Days when the discipline felt like punishment and you chose it anyway. Days when the solitude felt crushing and you used it anyway. Days when the distance between where you were and where you needed to go felt impossible and you walked toward it anyway. Not because you were fearless, not